Hey everyone, it's me Bailey and welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be my February wrap up, and I'm going to be talking about the 14 books that I read in the month of February. If you didn't watch my March TBR, I did go over the prompts that I did end up reading and completing, but I did not go over the books for those prompts. And if you want to know more about what books were for what prompts, then I suggest checking out my February TBR, where I pick the prompts and select the books to match the prompts. But for this video, I'm not really going to be going into the prompts per se. I'm just going to go into the books that I read and what I rated them and kind of what my thoughts were on them. So I was able to read 14 books in the month of February, which is pretty good if I would say so myself. It is a lot less than what I read in January, which that is completely and totally fine. It's not about the number, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of the books that you read. And so in February, I did get my first 5-star book of the year, which is the first book that I'm going to be talking about, which is Icebreaker by Hannah Grace. So I gave Icebreaker 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. So this follows Anastasia, who is an ice skater, and Nate, who is a hockey player, and something ends up happening at the university that they go to where they are forced to share a skating rink, and ice skaters and hockey players aren't super known to mingle, but with them sharing a rink, Nate offers to help Anastasia with her routine for a little bit until the rinks open back up. And so basically this is, I wouldn't really call this enemies to lovers or really rivals to lovers, more like argument to lovers, as in like they argue sometimes, but they weren't really like enemies and they weren't really like rivals or anything. But I ended up giving this 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. The banter was there, the connection, the spark, everything about this was just so good. I was able to read this on Kindle Unlimited right before they pulled it from Kindle Unlimited, so I'm super happy that I was able to get to it when I did. The second book that I read in the month of February was The Good for Nothings by Daniel Banas, and this is basically a young adult version of Guardians of the Galaxy meets Prison Break. So basically it's about these 4, I guess you could say, outcasts who have been sentenced to prison basically, and the warden comes to them and asks them to go on this mission to collect these keys, I believe it is, for them to unlock this chest that has this special thing inside of it that the warden is looking for. And so he enlists the help of these 4 criminals to find what he is looking for. And yeah, so basically there is an attempted prison break, a heist type situation. Like I said, this is a young adult novel, so it is very easy to read. It was not a super like long book, like it's not a super long book at all. And I definitely would recommend this to someone who is a little bit younger. I did end up giving this 4 stars, so I did enjoy it for the most part, but I don't really see myself reading this again. Also, there was kind of not necessarily like an open ending, but an ending that there could have been another novel if this were to turn into a series kind of thing. But yeah, overall I enjoyed this and I would recommend it to someone who's looking for a fun, quick sci-fi adventure story, and especially if you are a little bit younger, probably around like 12 to like 16 probably would be, in my opinion, the target audience for this novel. The next book that I read was Jasper Vale by Devney Perry, and this is the 4th book in the Eden series. This book follows Jasper, who is a boxing coach, and Eloise, who is one of the Eden siblings. She is the manager of a hotel that the Edens own in the town of Quincy, Montana. And one night while Jasper and Eloise are in Vegas for Eloise's future brother-in-law, so basically Eloise's sister's boyfriend or fiance. He is doing his final boxing match in Vegas, and while in Vegas, Jasper and Eloise end up getting married. And so this is a, I guess you would say, marriage of convenience maybe, but basically they end up getting married one night in Vegas and then decide to give their marriage a try basically, and then it turns into fake dating because Eloise needs to prove that she can run this hotel basically. And honestly, this was pretty good. I ended up giving it 4 stars. Definitely not my favorite in the series, but definitely not my least favorite either. This would probably go 3rd out of 4 that are out right now on the list. So yeah, but I would definitely recommend this series for sure. It is so good. Devney Perry's writing is just so easy to digest and it's so easy to read. And honestly, I like flew through this. I think I read like 150 pages in the span of like a few hours. Like I just absolutely devoured this, and I just devour everything that I've read by Devney Perry so far, and absolutely would recommend this series for sure. The next book that I read was When in Rome by Sarah Adams, and this is a grumpy sunshine, forced proximity sort of. One of them is famous, one of them is not type romance. So basically we follow this girl named Amelia, but her stage name is Ray Rose, and she ends up going to this small town called Rome in Kentucky to get away from her life, where she then meets grumpy pie store owner named Noah. And I enjoyed this book. I ended up giving it a 4 stars. It had quite a bit of tropes in it. It was celebrity, like one of us is famous, one of us is not. It had forced proximity because she and her car ends up breaking down in his front yard, and so she ends up needing to stay with him for the duration of her stay in Rome, Kentucky. Grumpy sunshine with him being the grump and her being like more sunshiny. This also is a closed door romance or no spice romance, if that is something that you are looking for. Sarah Adams does write no spice in her books, and she does it really well. Like you're not even missing anything, honestly, with the way that her stories play out. And yeah, honestly, I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars, and I definitely would recommend it. The next book is Drive Me Wild by Melanie Harlow, and this is a small town romance, grumpy sunshine, where this girl named Blair comes basically barreling into town in this white debutante dress. Her tire blows and she gets stuck in this town called Bellamy Creek, where she is on her way to go start a new life in a different town. But when the tire blows, she ends up meeting Knox, who is the mechanic in town, and they end up starting up a like situationship type thing, like a friends with benefits type situation. And he is in charge of fixing her car to get her where she needs to go, but they end up falling in love. And yeah, honestly, this was a good time. It was a fun read. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I really enjoyed the writing on this, and I really enjoyed the atmosphere, and honestly, I just really enjoyed the story. So if you're looking for a small town romance, I would recommend this series. It is a 4-book series. It is a companion series that follows 4 best friends and so on like that. So definitely would recommend it. I can't remember if I said this, but I did end up giving it 4 stars. The next book that I read was Sing Me to Sleep by R.M. Virtues, and this was a novella, a dark monster romance about this girl who goes through this traumatic event, and she starts having night terrors, and she starts having sleep paralysis and ends up falling in love with her sleep paralysis demon. I gave this 3 stars. It is as wild as it sounds. At certain points, it was very heavy on the plot, which did not make a lot of sense to me because it is a novella, so we didn't get a whole lot of background on the plot points and why the plot was plotting, if you will. So definitely something to be aware of if you're interested in checking this book out. Definitely also check the trigger warnings on this because it is pretty dark there, I believe, at the beginning. And yeah, so just check trigger warnings. The next book that I read was Delilah Green Doesn't Care, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So this book is about Delilah, and she is a photographer living in New York City, and she has been summoned basically by her stepsister and stepmother to come be the photographer at her stepsister's wedding. And so she has been forced to go back to her small town that she grew up in to photograph the wedding for her stepsister. And while she is there, she meets Claire, who is a single mother, and her and Claire were not necessarily like enemies when they were younger, but Claire was her stepsister, one of her stepsister's best friends, and it was very a strange relationship between Astrid, who is her stepsister, and Delilah. And so with that, Astrid's friends never really cared for Delilah, but when Delilah goes back to her small town, Claire does not recognize her at first, but then they kind of start a like friends with benefits secret relationship type deal, and they end up falling in love. This was really good. I enjoyed it. I did find that with the book, sometimes the way that it was written, because it was written in third person, sometimes I would get a little confused as to what point of view we were reading in, especially with it being a sapphic romance book and both of the main characters using like she, her pronouns. So definitely was a little confusing for me at points because I couldn't really differentiate between whose point of view was whose, because they weren't super distinct in my opinion. But I still really overall enjoyed the story. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars, so that's just something to kind of think about. Maybe I just wasn't reading close enough, but yeah, I still really enjoyed the book and I still would recommend it, and I do think that I will continue on with the other books in this companion series. So the next book that I read was Secretly Yours by Tessa Bailey, and I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I actually was pretty disappointed in this book. It wasn't very like interesting in the fact that it didn't really like catch my attention and keep it. I definitely was super excited for this book. This was one of my most anticipated releases of the year because I do love Tessa Bailey and her books, but unfortunately this one just didn't really do it for me. Basically, this follows Hallie, and she is a florist and a gardener, and she is very out of the box type of person, and she has been crushing on Julian, who is our main guy character, since high school, and he is very rigid in the box kind of guy, and it's very much a grumpy sunshine. He's grump, she's a sunshine, and she is basically, like I saw in a video, someone described her as like walking glitter. And so yeah, like I said, it just wasn't super attention grabbing. Like the plot was okay, like it wasn't really anything too like fantastic. There was a letter element in it to me that was just more frustrating than anything, because I just felt like Hallie could have communicated with Julian, because Julian was showing all the signs that he liked Hallie, and Hallie still decided to go the letter route instead of just like talking to him. So I don't know, I was pretty disappointed in this, but yeah, like I said, 3.5 stars. Not really sure I would recommend it, but I am more excited about the one that follows Julian's sister, because I feel like that one might be a little bit better than this one. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on that one. Then after that, I ended up reading Broken Bonds by Jay Bree, and this is the first book in the Bonds That Tie series, and this book follows our main girl, Ollie, and she has been running from her bonds. So basically this is a reverse harem, I would say fantasy novel, kind of more paranormal romance-esque novel about Ollie, like I said, who has been on the run from her bonds because she believes that if she goes to them, she will be putting them in danger basically. And so in the first book we basically get the story of them tracking her down to come and stay with them and how things kind of ensue from there, which then leads me to the next two books that I read, which were Savage Bonds and Blood Bonds, which are the second and third books in that series. So I gave Broken Bonds 4.5 stars, I gave Savage Bonds 4 stars, and then I gave Blood Bonds 3 stars. So I am still currently reading this series. It is a 6-book series, and it's very, like, don't get me wrong, it's good, but at this point I feel like it's more just kind of dragging than anything. The first book was so good, like I really enjoyed the first book, but it just feels like each book from there has just kind of gone down a little bit in my opinion. I feel like the series is starting to kind of drag on and run on a little bit, and I'm starting to get bored in it. I am currently on the last book right now, but I've also been reading the last book for like 2 weeks because I just can't get myself to pick it up, and when I do pick it up I read very little of it. So it's a hard one because the endings of them are so good. Like it's like the beginnings and the endings are so good, but then it's like the middle drags, and so that's what's been kind of putting me off on the series. So it's just been kind of hard, but like I said, overall a pretty good series. Definitely for someone I would say who is kind of getting started, I guess you could say, in the reverse harem or wide shoes type books, because it's not super heavy on the smut, but it is more plot heavy, and it does kind of get you used to what it's like to have one main person with multiple partners and kind of how the dynamics work in that. So definitely if you're looking for a like fantasy, paranormal, romance-esque book that also could introduce you to reverse harem, then I would suggest this series for you. The next book that I ended up reading was Final Offer by Lauren Asher, and this is the third book in the Dreamland Billionaires series. So basically this follows our third and final brother Cal, who has been tasked as a part of his grandfather's will to go spend the summer at the lake house that they had in Michigan. And when he gets there, he finds that Alana, who was his childhood, well, I guess not really childhood, more of his like teenage girlfriend, who he ended up breaking her heart. And now it has been, I think it was probably like 6 years later, and he has come back into her life and wants to sell the house that she is living in. And so yeah, basically it is, I don't really want to say enemies to lovers because they weren't really enemies, but they weren't really rivals either. Again, more of that like we argue all the time situation, you know. And it is also a second chance romance. It is also single parent because Alana is taking care of her niece, who doesn't know that she's her niece. She believes that she is her mother. And so yeah, I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I definitely would recommend checking triggers. I know that there are triggers for alcohol abuse as well as substance abuse and dealing with like family members who are also suffering from those things and stuff like that. But I did really enjoy this, and like I said, I gave it 4 stars. The next book that I read is probably my most disappointing read so far of this year, I guess you could say, and that is The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas. So this is the, I guess you could say, sequel-ish companion novel to the Spanish Love Deception. This follows Rosie and Lucas, and it is a forced proximity romance basically where Rosie's ceiling collapses in her apartment, so she goes to stay at her best friend's apartment while she is on her honeymoon, and Lucas, who is the cousin, is coming to New York to stay in that same apartment as well, and neither of them know that the other is there. And so they're basically forced to share this studio apartment until Rosie's ceiling can get fixed in her apartment. And yeah, this just did not do it for me. I ended up giving it 2 stars. It was a slow burn, and like not in the good way. It was a like fake dating or like experimental dating type situation, and I really just did not feel the chemistry between these 2 characters. Also, Rosie to me was like very like weird and cringe. Honestly, the whole book to me was just like very cringe. But Rosie virtually stalked this man and like thought it was cute and fun, and I was just like, girl, what? And then at one point she told him that she basically stalked him, and I was like, okay, weird, but like go off, sis. And so yeah, this was not for me. I did not like this. Was not fun time for me. Also, I definitely do not recommend the audiobook at all whatsoever, because the guy who voices Lucas in the audiobook, his voice just is like, no, he sounded very breathy, and like he was like forcing himself to try and sound like sexy, and it just like was not it. Which then brings me to the final book that I read in February, which was Forced Bonds by J. Bree, and this is the 4th book in the Bonds That Tie series. Again, going on with what I said earlier, reverse harem, paranormal romance. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars because I just feel like the series is kind of starting to go downhill for me, but that just might be me personally. So yeah, I definitely do recommend checking the series out for sure, because the first book was absolutely so solid, and I just think everything after that has just been kind of like struggling, and I just haven't been as into it as I was at the beginning. But that is all 14 books that I read in the month of February. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these, or if you're planning on reading any of these. I would love to discuss and chit chat with you guys down there. But yeah, so I think that is going to be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please make sure to give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos from me. And I will have all of my social medias linked down in the description. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.